welcome everyone to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee this evening. If we go to the agenda, first item is apologies for absence. We've got Councillor Harris. No one else? No? Good. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Minutes of the last meeting for correctness only, pages 3 to 16. Don?
Because it's a public record, under 4.10 on page 4, on the line 5 going down, we've got a the, and I think it should be a they. Sorry?
They
have
had
mitigated, as opposed to the.
The had, yeah.
Okay. And then going on to page 7, it looks like there's a numbering system gone slightly awry. On 6.15, I think there should be a 6.16 and then a 6.17. But
yeah. Thanks, Dom. Anyone else? Norma?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. It is in relation to paragraph 3.2, where it refers to me saying I was minded to record what the Strategic Director for Social Services gave us an update. I think my point was it was important to record in the minutes the discussion for public accountability rather than minded. And I note the point that's said there, but my question is, how long do these video recordings stay on the website? Because is that there forever? Because at the end of the day, you know, it's probably too late on this now, but my point is we should record the discussions that take place. And I think that was acknowledged by officers at the time. I think, Rhys, you acknowledged it from what I remember at the last meeting, because basically there was nothing to say what the Strategic Director of Social Services said at the meeting. And my point was we should have recorded, even, you know, at least a summary of what that was. And I think, yeah, and I think you responded on that, saying, actually acknowledging the points.
Kept for 6 years.
Sorry?
They're kept for 6 years, Norma. I think
right.
The issue is that obviously it needs to be minuted, really, because once the video's gone, the public record would always be the minutes if anyone looked at them. So
I think that's my point. And perhaps, you know, it doesn't necessarily. I still think it's an important issue, but certainly for the future, it's a lesson learned. We have to make sure if someone makes a presentation at the meeting, that is actually recorded, the discussion's recorded.
Yeah, we'll have a look at, obviously, there is a balance for us as well, because you look at it for quite a large proportion of the Democratic Services team currently sat in the room. So it's a balance between the resource requirements and doing it. But I take your point. I think we have, sorry, I'm looking behind me now because Mark had been sitting there. We have a technological solution, I think, which we're piloting at the moment, which actually will do the minutes for you during the course of the meeting, right? So it shouldn't be an issue in the future, but we'll take that one.
no, thanks, Rhys. I think, you know, even the salient points that are raised by the director should be noted rather than, you know, none of us are stenographers here, so you can't have a verbatim, but just any of the salient points need to be minuted. Anything else, Norma? Okay, subject to those corrections, someone prepared to move them as a correct record? Thank you, Jason. Seconder? Thank you, Dawn. Anyone against? Nope. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Corporate Risks Register. Sean?
Thanks, Chair. I'll introduce and then hand over to Paul. So this is the Q3 risk report, which covers the period from October through to end of December. So I would ask committee to note that at the end of Q3 there were 15 risks recorded in the Corporate Risk Register. 8 of those were designated as severe, 7 major risks. In comparison to Q2 of the Corporate Risk Register, 1 risk score decreased. which was the risk in relation to the failure to achieve the completion of the internal audit plan. So that has reduced slightly, but all of the remaining risks do not change in score in Q3.
Thank you.
So just to add to Sean's introduction, just going to draw your attention to the risk management policy which was presented at the Governance and Audit Committee last time. It's just to advise the committee that the policy has now been approved by the Council's Cabinet. That happened earlier this month. The recommendations and the comments and the feedback received from the committee, we took those on board and we updated the policy to reflect those changes as well. So we just want to thank the committee for their input into the policy. And from April next month, we'll start to implement that new policy now into the future Governance and Audit Committee updates as well. So just to add on to Sean's updates, so yeah, as Sean said, we've got 8 severe risks and 7 major risks, and the internal audit plan risk has reduced from 16 to 9. The summary and explanation is included into the report, and obviously the internal audit manager is also here today if there's any questions directly in relation to that, and also the head of finance as well. All the other risks remain the same for Q3. Obviously, coming up into Q4, we're starting the process of service planning and looking at our 24-25 work as well. So service areas are reviewing all of their risk registers, and obviously we're looking at the corporate risks as well. So in Q1, there will be kind of any changes will be reported there as well in relation to that. So I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you. Paul, any questions? Dom?
Paul, on page 23 on my report, with your nice squares, you've got 2 R8s.
Thank you, Dom. I'll make a note of that and make sure that
I don't know which one's right.
Let me just have a quick look at that.
You've got an R8 in 5.3 and one in 4.4.
So I think by the looks of things, I think it's the one in the 5.3 which is incorrect. And yeah, we'll make a note of that and we'll make sure that that's adjusted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I thought you were edging your bets there. Norma?
Okay. Thank you, Chair. One question and one comment. On the housing and homelessness, why is it taking 2 years to prepare the homelessness prevention and support strategy? Because it seems to me a long time. And then just a comment really on the risks, particularly the severe risks. I think I understand completely because a lot of these are demand-led. Most of them are demand-led. And I don't know the answer to this, but it's worthwhile recording. The only ones that aren't demand-led are the highways network and the property estates. And one of the worries here is lack of investment, and I understand the pressures, is actually going to lead us to even greater expenditure in the future. And I don't know how the council manages that, but it's, you know, it's a fact of life, isn't it? If we don't invest in these, we're going to have even more expense in 3, 4, 5 years' time. And I understand all the financial pressures. So that's really a comment more than anything. But something to think about, really.
Yeah, so on your first bit about the housing bit, I think, you know, it's within your remit you could refer that to the scrutiny committee, to place in corporate scrutiny committee, to ask the head of service why it's taken 2 years to produce that. Obviously, your role is to review the policy side of the risk and how we're applying the policy, corporate risk policy. But I think that's a legitimate question to refer to the relevant scrutiny committee. So we can do that if the committee wishes to. Points about assets and highways. You know, Newport City Council will be no different. I've said this loads of times in lots of different places now, right? But it will be no different to most of the local authorities across England, Wales and Scotland, in as much as they've got significant infrastructural burdens, and whether that's the highways network or their assets, which have not had enough investment in them over an extended period of time. You know, I mean 30, 40 years probably. And Newport, you know, we've had it, and Newport hasn't been affected by the issue around RAC, but we've all seen that in the news and about the impacts that's had across England and Wales. So, you know, I have no answers to it, Norma. You are right. We're a kind of an ever decreasing, you know, pot of money going towards probably an increase in issue. It's why we've got things like the asset rationalisation programme. But obviously additional challenges for us are we've got a very fast growing population as well, which we need to try and manage.
Yeah, thanks. Is it just even going back to the highways? You know, with the highway infrastructure, everything else, we find all the potholes, everything else. What mitigation we getting then from people who are putting complaints, complaints again with potholes, and how much money is being spent out on compensation for that?
I can give you an answer, Councillor, but I think again, if that's something you want to refer to the same scrutiny committee, corporate in place, I think that's fine to explore that more. The legal coverage around those things is the Highways Asset Management Plan. As long as you're delivering against that, actually, you are legally covered. And I know, because we had a Freedom of Information request recently around insurance payments, that they're not large. So, but again, you know, that might be something you want to refer to the relevant scrutiny committee for exploration with the head of service and service managers.
Cox.
Chair, I just wanted to make a comment about highways as well while we're on the subject, please. That, you know, I fully accept the point that's been made that the issue with that highways isn't of Newport Council's making, that there's been a colossal underinvestment in highways for over a long period, and a lot of the work that's going on with highways, I appreciate, is basically firefighting. And but there were just two points. One is probably a bit of a minor point, really, but I thought it was worth mentioning that when we're talking about the direction of risk, it actually says quite clearly in the report that the state of highways is getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and that there's very little that can be done about that in terms of long-term investment. Yet the direction of risk is shown as constant. It would seem to me if the highways are deteriorating day by day and there's no possibility of investing in them to put them in the proper state they should be in, and you know, there's nothing the council can do about that, then it just seems to me patently obvious the situation is going to get worse and worse, not stay constant. And I had another point, Chair.
Yeah, to respond to that. So I think we can probably check with the service area and the person who's responsible for that about the rationale for it and make that more clear. Again, the risk is measured against the Highways Asset Management Plan and your ability to deliver against that rather than the state of the road. So, but we'll double check that, and if there needs to be further explanation put in, then we can get that done.
Also on highways, on page 48, I must say I was rather surprised to see a statement there on risk mitigation that basically, it's a bold statement, there's nothing that can be done, we've sort of tried everything and nothing works, therefore we can't do anything else. I'm sorry, it's a bit of a paraphrase of it, but that's essentially what it's saying. That I would have, I suppose it's an old adage, isn't it? There's always something that can be done, even if it's not very much at all. And it's, to be quite frank, if we're going to be blunt, I don't think it reflects very well on the council putting a statement like that in a risk assessment. And clearly things have been done, things have been attempted, and I think at the very least we should show what is being done, even if the writers of the report don't feel that it's getting us very far in terms of progress.
So there's 2 points to make to that, Councillor. The first point is, in the start of the document, we've got existing arrangements to manage the risk. So this particular risk is being managed, as Reece pointed out, within the Highways Asset Management Plan, which they've currently got in place. And my understanding is that that is being updated and is going to be going to the Scrutiny Committee at some point in Q1. So what we're doing as part of the service plan review, we're going to be looking at this particular risk as well to see what's coming out of the Highways Asset Management Plan, to see if there's any additional actions that can be made in order to support this risk going forward. So we're going to be reviewing that as part of this review, and we'll reassess it and we'll work with the service area to look at that and to align that into the new Highways Asset Management Plan, which will come into place. So hopefully that will address that concern about the actions, the mitigating actions to manage that risk going forward. But as the Director rightly pointed out, they're managing it as part of the kind of like the routine investments which we have. It's the additional investment that's needed in order to improve it. So, yeah, it is something which it's on our radar, as something which we're looking at, and yeah, hopefully when you see the report in Q1, you probably will see some changes there as well. Okay.
Anything else, anyone? Don?
Yeah, Paul, just picking up on page 59, okay? I'm probably going to hear the chair say for another place, but I can't resist it. With the schools, with the direction of travel, it's equal, but you've got 12, 13 who aren't going to be able to set a balanced budget, and it just seems that that's pretty serious, and it all seems, even with the mitigation plan, seems very fragile. I understand why. I'm just saying maybe the direction of travel on that one is shouldn't it be going up?
So there's 2 points to make. This is looking back to when it was Q3, around about December time. So I might have to refer to the head of finance here around the budgets. So it might have been at that point in time that the budgets might not have been completely clear in terms of what the financial projection was going to look like for schools for 24-25. So I'll refer to the head of finance here who might be able to explain that.
I think as Paul was saying, at that time, I think that is kind of appropriate, and we will, as always, look to update this. But that score is going to remain very elevated, as you can appreciate. And we take some comfort. It is only some comfort in the sense of that we deal with these issues successfully every year. I'm not going to promise you that will be possible going forward, but we also take that also. We do deal with this, and we always say, gosh, this is getting worse and worse and worse, and yet we continue to sort of, as a sector actually, as well as this council, we tend to deal with them. So therefore, the decision to keep that kind of constant was predicated on those issues as well.
I'm still not convinced. I think the direction of travel's up, but there we go. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Just about what Don said, about these two schools projecting close to you in deficit. Are they primary schools or secondary schools? Are you allowed to say it, or is that?
Yeah, I don't think that's relevant to us. I think, with all due respect, I think there's a couple of questions or comments I'd make. I think in regards to school deficits, then you tend to find that school deficits, or when they're in surplus, they change year on year. And I don't know what this council's policy is, but as long as the school can give you a formal plan as to how they're going to get out into a deficit, into a positive, then you allow them to go into the deficit, provided there's a plan to get them into the positive. I assume that with the current financial climate, a lot more schools will go in, unless they've got substantial reserves, will start going into a deficit situation, and then you'll be asking them to get back into a a zero or a positive situation as things go on. But I don't understand, obviously I don't know what the timescale is for that. Is it 1, 2 or 3 years you allow them to stay in that deficit situation?
Yeah, Chair, I can't remember off the top of my head here today what that timescale is, but what we are doing with schools now is making it very, very clear that whilst the direction of travel is for reducing reserves, that needs to be sort of slowed down and stopped. And yes, we've got a couple of schools that are getting close to it, and we've got people that are working with them specifically to deal with their financial recovery plans. And again, it's sadly, it is a well-trodden path, and one that and schools have been successful in doing before. So, we're not concerned at this point. It's day to day.
And I think it's not going to get any easier as we move forward. Sorry, Councillor Cox.
I wanted to make a comment on education. There are two aspects of the report that I would like to comment on, please. I honestly think anybody involved in education as a parent or as a teacher or as a school governor would be very, very surprised to see that education isn't up amongst the corporate risks. And to be quite frank, I can't understand why it isn't. So if the if I can make 2 points. One is that we've just been talking about school budgets, and if we look, I think it's on page 5960, school budgets, that the whole concern there is that schools stay within budget. I mean, I can't really see any other concern that's expressed. They all relate to the school budget and keeping schools in budget and monitoring schools in budget and supporting schools are not within the budget. But the corporate risk, the risk register isn't just about, I agree, staying within budget and it is clearly an important factor within the risk register, but it's not the only one. I mean, if we look, for example, at definitions of risks. It clearly indicates that we should also be looking at the risk of that there is of the council not being able to deliver a service, or particularly it actually says in terms of a definition of a severe risk that that would entail not being able to deliver a service to vulnerable people. So it's a bit more about the money, and what I find very strange is that there isn't any risk identified in terms of those constant hacking back of school budgets and cutbacks in school budgets. I mean, schools across Newport have this year taken a massive hit in terms of funding for children with additional needs, who by definition are vulnerable children who need it. I mean, we don't... I think it's well known, isn't it, that the COVID and the aftermath of that's had a massive impact on children. So it's not just the fact the school's got to be kept within a budget. It seems to me is a massive risk in terms of what the consequences of that are, in terms of the service schools are delivering and the state of school buildings, etc., etc. And that isn't mentioned anywhere. I can see anywhere in this risk register. Apart from, if I can go back to, and to make one more point on this, please. If we go to sort of page 39, there is a mention of the consequences of reduced school budget, reduced spending on education, and that actually talks about focuses on children with additional learning needs, and the risk there is that the funding will obviously have a negative impact on the ability to support children with additional learning needs. But what I can't see anywhere in that particular risk and the description of that risk is it's quite open in that there's very little that can be done, that the number of children on waiting lists or not able to get access are likely to increase. In terms of risk mitigation, to be quite frank, as somebody with a long experience in education, to be quite frank, I can't see anything on page 40 in risk mitigation which is actually going to result in any extra resources or any extra provision for children with additional learning needs. Yet the whole thing is given a risk rating of 12. And I, to be quite frank, I think that massively underestimates the issues that we're looking at in education. And as far as a council, I think it's important that we really do focus on where there are major risks. And, I think I've made the point. I think there's one there that's missing in quite a big way, to be quite frank.
Just going to address a couple of points raised there by the councillor. And yeah, some of them are quite valid. I think you have to understand that you quite rightly pointed out that the demand for additional learning needs and SEN support is there, and there's also out-of-county places, which is also a corporate risk, which is linked into additional learning needs, and both of those correlate to the pressures that the service is facing. I think it has to be considered in terms of that service already has existing controls and governance arrangements in place to manage those and to manage those pressures within those requirements. The role of internal audit, then, they come in and they can review it and assess those governance and internal control arrangements to assess whether those are managing those risks effectively, or is there more that the service could be doing, or, to give that assurance around those activities. The other thing to point out is that, a lot of these risks are interlinked. So whilst they might be there standalone as just the demand on additional learning needs or the school finances and school budget pressures, they're also linked into the asset management risk. There's also links into the medium-term financial plan risk, etc. So there's a lot of kind of intricacies and, correlation between all of these corporate risks in the corporate risk register. And then the final point to add in is that there are also service area risks which are managed within the service area. They're not quite corporate. They're a risk to the service area, but they're not considered to be a corporate risk. And within education, they do have risks around the projection in terms of pupil projections and in terms of other risks relating to education, and they're managed within that service area. So they are always constantly looked at and reviewed, and a lot of this stuff is also picked up through the service plans, which are presented to the Performance Scrutiny Committee. And as the Director pointed out earlier, if you've got any comments or anything that could be raised for them to perhaps inquire or look at, then feel free to kind of do that as your role there as a Governance and Audit Committee.
No, without repeating everything that Paul's just said, I won't do that. I just feel like I do need to say at this point, though, Newport, there are challenges and pressures. Newport schools, we haven't got any schools in any sort of measures with Estin. They continue to perform really well compared to national indicators. We had a meeting with Estin a couple of weeks ago. They've not raised any significant concern or any particular concerns with the education services within Newport. So I get there are lots of pressures. The big corporate risk for us at the moment is around ongoing finances, as it would be for most places. But Newport schools do well. They deliver a good service. I think the evidence would back that up.
Yeah, I think we just need to remember this is as at the 31st of December 23, so this is a risk set up before the budget round and the budget settlement for schools, and I understand fully Councillor Cox's concern in regards to the budgetary pressures on schools, but I think we need to remember, firstly, these are coming from education. Secondly, schools are autonomous. They got LMS, local management schools, so they deal with their funding themselves, and they have to cut their cloth accordingly, despite what the local authority gives them in regards to their funding regime. So that's an issue. I think the other point I think we need to remember is that the Director of Education has got enough powers to intervene in a school by various notices in any event. So if there are major concerns about how it's being managed, the school, then it can serve a warning notice on the school and then intervene if it wishes to. So I think going forward, I'm sure that education would pick them up. And my concern is a lot of these issues, in some respects, should be 25, because things aren't going to get any better as we move forward, and then all of a sudden we'll have risks which are based at 25. I think just picking up the highways issues that was raised, we've got highways asset management plan projects an anticipated annual capital investment of £500,000. That's a drop in the ocean in reality. I had to think how many tens of millions of pounds the highway network would need to put it back up to 100%. I don't know what it is. There's bound to be a figure, 80, 90, 100 million pounds, I should imagine. And again, the revenue budget is 1.86 million. It's a drop in the ocean in reality. And Rhys will know, and many councillors and others in the room will know, Welsh Government gave some funding years ago for highway repairs, but it was, again, a minuscule amount in regards to what the issues are in regards to highways. And that's not just in Newport, that's across Wales. And if you have a look at some of the roads in some of the rural communities, they're shot, they're appalling. I think, picking up your point, Rhys, I think it would be worthwhile getting a couple of recommendations, apart from noting this report and when we go forward, in regards to asking scrutiny to look at the housing issue again. That it is an assurance issue, certainly for me, as to taking 2 years to get in place a policy, and it would be useful, I think, for scrutiny to look at it and to report back to us on that issue. The one in regards to highways, again, is another issue. But I think some of the assurances you give, and I think if Tracy had been here, certainly in regards to your buildings and your asset management plan going forward, asset rationalisation in regards to buildings is a big issue. Trying to get rid of some of your buildings you don't need. But it's always the case, I think, that you mentioned to me, Rhys, and the committee, we're sat in a building here which will cost millions of pounds to renovate in reality, with a minuscule maintenance budget. I think you need to look at the ceilings and, and the water ingress and things like that. It's a bit of a chain and a lock and everything else around your neck, this building, because it's listed. I think it's grade 1 listed. Well, grade 2 star, so not as good as a grade 1, but it's still a huge commitment, isn't it, to this authority. So, and I think, funding of some of these issues aren't going to get better. And I think people need to be honest, directors need to be honest. Just because you've got a low score actually doesn't reflect what it's like out there in the streets. You can manage as best you can, but, in regards to highways repairs, I'd hate to think how much it's going to cost you this year going forward. And picking up Jason's point, and how many claims have you had, and how much does that cost? Does your insurance premium go up, or whatever? I expect you pay a lot of these claims yourself, because there'll be an excess, is there, Myra, in regards to what you'll pay. So, unless there are any other comments to be made, I think if someone could do a couple of recommendations in regards to highways and housing, with a request that an urgent report be brought back to us in a reasonable time, Rhys. I don't know how long scrutiny takes in this authority, but I think we just need a response.
So, end of year reports will be going to performance scrutiny committees in June.
Right.
Chair. So we can liaise with Democratic Services to see when the most reasonable time is to come back to Governance and Audit Committee.
Okay.
It should be in July.
Yeah, we don't need dragging on, do we? But and again, we'll have your new corporate risk register anyway when in April, May, June anyway, won't we? So, we'll be in a bit of a better place then as well. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else got any comments? No. So, subject to those two recommendations, if someone can draft them up, and I think we note the obviously the contents of this report. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Jason. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Norma. Anyone against? Nope. Thank you. Next item then is the lessons learned 22-23 accounts, close down and financial statement preparation.
Thank you, Chair.
Hi, Laura.
Hi. So the paper that was presented to Governance and Audit Committee details the lessons learnt review that was undertaken following the 22-23 Statement of Accounts publication. This review happens every year and follows both an internal review between Newport Council officers that are involved within the close down process, and then with the technical team and Audit Wales. And this report highlights what we improved upon from the 21-22 accounts, what went well in the 22-23 accounts, and what we can continue to improve on for this year's accounts. So the main thing to highlight for the 22-23 is that the process, it generally went very well. We published the accounts by the deadline. The majority of tasks were completed in line with the closing timetable, and there was a good working relationship with Audit Wales. There's a number of areas that we also improved upon from the 21-22 accounts, and in particular those were the processes around agreeing reserves, and we had 100% return for related party forms as well. A longer review was also built into the closing timetable this year, and that meant that the quality of the accounts submitted to Audit Wales at draft were improved, and that's probably reflected in the amount of corrected misstatements were less than in previous years as well. But as always, as there's a lot of positives, there's also room for improvements as well. And the report does go into details about what those improvements should be, the majority of which we've actually started working on. So the main issues that were picked up by Audit Wales is the zero net book assets. That was something that was highlighted as needing improving, and a significant amount of work was done as part of last year. Audit Wales did find a further 2 assets that were on the Council's fixed asset register that were no longer in use by the Council, but that work has continued within the between this financial year, and that is particularly important as well as we move over to the new system that's going live next week. The other main issue that was raised by Audit Wales was the construction inflation uplift. This was first introduced within the 21-22 accounts, and whilst Audit Wales was satisfied with our approach in calculating this as part of the 22-23 accounts, there were some incorrect figures that were included. This was not corrected within the 22-23 accounts, as it was deemed that it was immaterial due to the amount of work that was involved. And as that calculation has been done annually, that should be corrected in this accounts as well. But what we're going to try and do is to make sure that that task is done earlier in the process so that it can be reviewed by other teams, and we've got a longer time to review that task. The timetabling for the annual government statement also needs to improve. So whilst the timing was better this year, it could be improved so it's published at the same time as the draft accounts. And then the other thing is that grants testing is always a substantial piece of work that needs to be done by Audit Wales, and that could be started earlier on in the audit process. The Council has also implemented a new grants process internally to ensure that all the grant information is saved in the same place, and that will hopefully ensure consistency across the board, although it should be noted that that's going to be embedded fully from 24-25. Audit Wales have also provided some good practice examples as well to try and cut down on the amount of follow-up queries. And then meetings have been held with Newport Live around the valuations of PPE. Monthly meetings have now been put in place to ensure that the evaluations are not being left to one individual, and to ensure that it will not have the same impact that it did have on the 22-23 accounts. And then just to raise the end of the report, just makes a note about IFRS 16, which is the new leasing standard that's been adopted from the 1st of April 24. It's a significant accounting change as it changes the way that the authority will need to account for leases. And work has already been undertaken across the council, including schools, but will need to be continually reviewed throughout 24-25 in particular, but that will be an ongoing process as well. So happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you, Laura, for bringing this report to us. Again, lessons to be learned. That's what we're here for, and you know, any way we can improve the service. And clearly, your team have taken on board all the points raised, which is really good. We'll see what happens now when the next statement the accounts are shut. So no sooner as you've done one, we're into the next one. So just to say thank you and your team, and it's not, you know, Nigel and that and Byron. If you can fail, thanks. Any questions? No. Oh, Norma?
Thank you, Chair. I think I've just got one point, really. A really good report. You know, it feels when you read it that you've taken an objective view of everything and actions are in place, some of which have been done. But I just wondered about ongoing monitoring. How will the committee be assured that everything has been done? I think that's my question.
So as part of this work, I basically make a list of any issues that we've raised, whether that's through our own internal reports or whether that's Audit Wales that has raised it. And we, as part of the closing timetable, that will be part of the review, and we can always bring that to audit, back to Governance and Audit Committee if required as well.
I think the issue is, Norma, is that because they'll be closing the accounts fairly soon, I don't know what the due date is this year. Is it earlier? It gets earlier and earlier, doesn't it? Is it May this time, or is it June? Or
It's June, but with the view that it would be May in a few years. Yeah.
So the issue I think we've got as a committee is they'll close the accounts. We'll get the draft accounts. Clearly, Wales auditors will have a little look at them. All we hope is that they don't pick up the same issues again. So we will see that when it comes through next time. I think it be a bit unfair to ask them to address they will address them as they do the draft accounts. If they come up again, then obviously I'm sure Laura will take that on board. But as you said, and Nigel and the team have address these issues. We'll look at them when we close the accounts this year, and hopefully there will be less things that Wales Audit will pick up. I'm sure they'll pick something up. They always do, but that's their job. Just to say that that will be done. Any other questions? Any comments? Now you see the recommendation that we note the lessons learned process that has been carried out to date and the planned improvement following the lessons learned review. Someone prepared to move, please. Thank you, Don. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Jason. Anyone against? No. Thank you. Thank you, Laura, for that. Next item is the internal audit annual plan 24-25. Dan, is that you? You're going to take us, or is Marion going to stay a little quieter now? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. So this is the internal audit plan for 24-25. In terms of the creation of the plan, it's been produced in collaboration with heads of service. Obviously, a key part of that is Marion as head of finance. As part of the construction of the plan, we've also had meetings with the chair of the Governance and Audit Committee and Paul in front from his risk side of things. The plan's also been taken to the exec board and approved there, and will be shared with the cabinet member for finance. In terms of contents of the plan, the key things to highlight. So reviews which couldn't be undertaken within 23-24, mainly due to resource issues within the year, they've been passed on to the current to the 24-25 plan. You'll see in there the 2 follow-up reviews which you previously had presented to you. Also in there are 3 reviews on the new finance system. That's been split into 3 to enable different reviews to be taken at key points within the year following the work around go live there. There's also a number of cross-cutting reviews, such as P-cards and overtime. And there's also some time in there for targeted counter-fraud work. There's an ongoing piece of work around fraud risk assessment at the moment. That will be finalised in the next few weeks. So therefore, there's a pot of time kept spare for kind of deep dives on areas that finds as high risk. The plan is as it's presented, but it remains flexible. If things crop up during the year which are deemed high risk or priority, then they'll be taken into consideration. It isn't completely fixed. And then other point is around resources. So obviously there's been challenges, as well known, around resources within the current financial year. We've taken steps already to try and provide a bit of a backstop for 24-25 so that same position doesn't arrive again. So we've got 2 vacancies within the team at the moment, and SWAP Internal Audit have been procured to provide up to those 2 vacancies. However, recruitment and exercise will happen within Q1. Happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you, Dan, and firstly, thank you for the opportunity of having a discussion with you prior to obviously formulating this and explaining to me what the process was, which we were going through. So thank you for that, and thank Myron and his team for allowing that. That was greatly appreciated. Any questions? No? Any comments? No? The only comments I'd make is obviously we've got quite a lot of high-risk identified projects within that. It would be useful if those can be dealt with first before we can get to the medium risks, if you can schedule it that way. The second point I always make, hopefully we haven't over-committed and we'll be under-delivering, because obviously it's been quite a challenging year this year. But again, thanks to you and your team, and certainly Myron for trying to get people into post. You know, I think we've recovered that somewhat this year. So just to say thank you for that. And if we can actually, you know, deliver this audit plan going forward for next year, that will be, you know, that's a great result. So thank you for that. Okay. Someone prepared to move the recommendation that the plan of 24-25 be approved by us? Thank you, Don. Seconded by Jason. Anyone against? No. Thank you very much. Next item is the Governance and Audit Committee self-assessment. Rhys?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I suppose this flows on from the annual report that we presented and you discussed in the last meeting. So SIPFA recommend that governance and audit committees review themselves against a set of criteria, and that's reported then in that annual report. Now, we didn't do that in the first report, but the proposal is that we now look to do that from here on in. So really, it's looking at the skills and experiences of the committee, and actually allowing us then, as working with yourselves, to develop a development plan in order to bridge any gaps and develop any skills where we feel there might be some sort of deficit. So the report before you then shows, based on the SIPFA report, a questionnaire which covers a range of those criteria. Which we would be, once you've approved it, would be asking members of this committee to complete. I think it's important to say that we would do that in a way which was anonymised. So what the committee would then consider as anonymised data when it was looking at the sort of development plan, and Leanne and I have got a way of doing that through an online survey. So we won't get any personal details. But obviously any information that we gather through that will be covered by requirements around general data protection regulations as well. So really, Chair, it was for comments on the process, comments on the questions, any changes to that, and then agreeing some timescales for a committee to do this.
Thank you. Any questions, anyone? No? Any comments? No? Fully support this, Rhys. I think the question there is fairly robust. I think people just need to be honest when they fill it in, because again, if there's a lack of knowledge in certain areas, I think some training just before a committee is useful, which you've done over the past 2 years now. It'll be so. That's very useful, and again, any update information again would be very useful. I think again, because obviously complaints is on this questionnaire, and I thought that was quite useful again by the Ombudsman's office. So I'm fully, and hopefully the committee be fully conversant and agreeable to that. So the questionnaire, I think, is fine, subject, there's no comment there. The timescale I would suggest is we be asked to complete it by the 30th of April, so that gives us 4 weeks. Is that okay? And I'd suggest then that we consider the responses at the meeting of the 30th of May. That fits in quite nicely, really, if you're happy with that. So if committee can respond by the 30th of April, so if they can go out as soon as you can, it gives us 4 weeks to complete it. Hopefully we don't need 4 weeks. We should be able to deal with that fairly quickly, and then once you compile them, to bring a report back on the 30th of May. You happy with that, Rhys?
Yeah, that's okay. So we'll agree, if it's okay with the committee, we'll agree with you, Chair, outside of it, the mechanism for sending it out. Because Leanne and I have spoken about it. We just need to confirm how we're going to do it, I think. And if we'll have a conversation with you, and then we'll write to members to say this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah,
is that all right?
That's okay. Yeah, I don't know what members' view are about anonymising them, because in reality, does it make that much difference? But I'll leave that for people to ponder on if they've got any great issue about it being, you're not being named on it, because again, all it'll come back with ultimately is where the areas need to be addressed. Not so, you're not going to come back and say, Council A wants this, Council B wants that. You'll compile it and say, there's some areas for improvement are in these areas, and that's it. So I don't know what members' view is on that. Don?
Yeah, I don't like anonymous. I think, because it shows where our weaknesses are and our strengths, and it helps, make a, rather than try and create some sort of general thing, we can actually get something that's more bespoke that's actually going to help us as a committee. Yeah. So I don't like anonymous.
Happy with that? Yeah, okay, there we are. Yeah, exactly. So, subject to that then, so we note the contents of the report. We agree the wording of the self-assessment questionnaire, which is appended to the report. Timescale for completion by members is by the 30th of April 2024, and that the questionnaire responses come back to the 30th of May committee. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Dawn. Anyone against? No. Thank you very much for that. Item then is item 8, the work programme. Work programme's there on the report.
I suppose there's not a massive amount to say. You've got a pretty chock-a-block 30th of May. One which includes, I think we're doing some with Audit Wales because they've got a series of grants, annual reports on grant works to come through, which haven't come through previously. So I think they'll probably, spoken to them about, they'll probably do that in one report to cover those off. I suppose really one of the important thing is the appointment of chairperson is on the agenda for it as well. So I would suggest we'll probably write out for nominations and seconders beforehand, and then we'll do that as the first order of business in the meeting.
Rhys, where's Appendix 2?
I don't know. We'll send that. Sorry for that. I didn't even notice that Appendix 2 was written at the bottom of that. So we'll send that out. So obviously, what we've got in the forward work programme, Chair, is the next meeting. Yeah.
This thing with the chair. You all right there, Jason? Yeah, you're okay. What about that chair? You okay with that one? Because I think for us, can we do it now, or we're not allowed to do it now, or what?
Well, the 1 year is up in May, so I think we're best if we'll do it properly, regardless of what your views might be. We'll ask for nominations and seconders, and then we'll take a vote on it in the meeting.
So does that mean I don't have to get my manifesto out, Reece?
Yes, that does mean that.
I think the question is, Reece, is that I don't think, I'm not sure about Norma, but there will be no other nominations, I believe, apart from me. Unless Norma wishes to do it this year.
So I just think...
just send it out. Send the nominations
I just
out.
think, that is... It's in the May agenda every year because that is the timescales for it. We'll ask for nominations for chair and vice, and then we will vote on it in the meeting. I would say you will vote on it in the meeting, and that will be the first order of business.
No, that's okay. And I think the point Dom made is obviously we got the agenda for the 30th of May, plus now the responses to the questionnaire. Is there are the other meetings, and now presumably they are on Appendix 2.
Yeah, we'll get that sent out.
Yeah.
Apologies for that.
Okay, so someone proposed the recommendation is just to endorse the proposed schedule of the meeting on the 30th of May, and when we get the additional Appendix 2, that I'm sure they'll be approved in any event. Yeah, subject to the addition of the questionnaire responses on the 30th of May. Prepared to move on? Thank you. Seconded, Jason. Anyone against? No, thank you. Date of meeting then. Next meeting is the 30th of May at 5 p.m. Can I thank everyone for attending the meeting this evening, and have a jolly good Easter holidays. I think Reece has got a session for us for a couple of hours now, haven't you, on something or other? So thank you very much.